Welcome to the Your Next Move podcast. And today we are talking about one of my favorite things, relationships. Whenever I think I have no more content on building relationships in the workplace, I always find something. And I came up with this framework during an executive coaching session where we were talking about finding mentors and sponsors and identifying the type of person who you need to connect with. So chapter 6 of my book, Next Move, Best Move, Transitioning into a Career You'll Love. Chapter 6 is called Relationships Are Still Everything. And they are, which is why we still talk about them so much. We still don't understand that we need different types of relationships almost within like the larger types, right? So in that chapter of my book, I talk about how we need to have peers, so people who are inside and outside of your industry, who are at the same level or around there. We need mentors who have been there, done that, who can help support you in your career. Sponsors, the ones who can lift you up from where you are and take you to where you want to go. And we also need teachers, folks who can actually teach you something. But within that, I've broken it down into subcategories that I want to share with you today. And we're going to link that. So that's episode 35 of the podcast where I break down those core types. But today, the subcategories are people who you admire, people who you respect, and people who move the needle. So let's get into it. When we talk about someone who you admire, it's generally that person in the workforce who you are drawn to like a magnet. If we're talking about strengths profile, right? One of my favorite assessments, that may be someone who has a strong woo. The woo is just that, ooh, like, I really like being in the room with this person. I like how they speak. I like how they talk, how they walk. They just have a vibe about them that you can quickly notice, and this generally gives them influence. You just can't help but want to be around this type of human being. And you can admire them for so many different reasons. Maybe it's their gravitas when they're speaking or how they effortlessly connect with other people. It could be their presence when they enter a space. And it could simply be because you see them and you're like, hey, like you're really cool and I want to be cool with you. Like, let me get to know you. These are the people who you have feel-good relationships with because of their charm and charisma. So for me, the first time I had a relationship with someone who I admired, this was back in my higher education days. So back when I was in higher education, when I started in higher ed, I think in 2010, I got into career services in 2011, and I knew I wanted to become a director of career services, period. So I started attending a lot of industry events, and there was this one person who was magnetic. She was always speaking at the conferences. She was dressed to the nines every time she got up there to speak. Everyone was just drawn to her. She knew her stuff, and she knew it and articulated it in a way that made everyone listen. I immediately knew that this was a person who I wanted to build a relationship with. And I proactively got in the room with her, introduced myself, and ultimately we built a relationship over the span of several years, and I ended up working for her at one point in my career. That's an example of someone who I admired. Next up is someone who you respect. Now, these are the folks who sometimes feel a little tough. Or like my dad would say, they don't take no junk. That's what people who are in that category, right? So there's something about them that people respect. It could be their work ethic, how they navigate difficult situations, how they solve challenging problems. And it's something about them that really helps yield results that sets them apart from everyone else and gives them some much deserved authority in the space they're in. Generally, I like to look for people who are very quantitative in that area. You'll hear me say several times, I know I've said it before, that I'm a very qualitative person. I like to tell stories versus get into the numbers and Excel spreadsheets. And I think that I really look for people who kind of show that and are tough in the workplace. An example of this for me, during my time at a Fortune 100 company in financial services, I knew I needed more sponsors. And I was at a Black executive event, a global Black executive event. And there was a woman in the room who I felt like they parted the seas when she came in. Every time she spoke, you could see people were listening and attentive, and not because of the woo factor, but because of how she meant business. Her posture, how she sat, how she spoke, how folks interacted with her. I just knew she was about that life. And Everyone was very excited to wait in line to speak with her. She never had a moment outside of going to the bathroom. And when I asked around about her, they said that she was a very tough yet influential leader. She was known for driving massive results in her area of the business. So as I asked around, I found someone who she mentored and asked them for an introduction to her. And ultimately, she became a great mentor and sponsor in my career. But it came from literally seeing her part the seas at this event and me feeling intimidated. And instead of feeling like imposter syndrome, for me, I was like, oh no, like I need her to be in my network. I want that type of depth in my relationships. Let me go after and make a relationship with her. So last but not least, we have the folks who can move the needle. And I say these are the folks who you may rarely encounter because they're making the biggest moves. And these are the heavy, heavy hitters, y'all. The type of people where you probably can never get on their calendar. And if you do, it gets rescheduled and rescheduled and rescheduled again. So you generally have to play a long game to get in contact with them. And these are the folks who you'd say that if you want to talk to them, you know their calendar is crazy. When you build a relationship, they may say something to you like, hey, I have a meeting where I have to travel from this floor to this floor. It'll take me about 10 minutes to do that. You got me for those 10 minutes, whatever you need. And they're so influential that when they get into a room, it changes the entire atmosphere. They literally make things happen because of who they are, their influence, the impact that they have. They're just known for that. An example I have is the same woman who I mentioned earlier, because she had the influence to move that needle, very sponsorship-like, but it was in a terms of moving my career, she could move it. In terms of moving different relationships, she just had the influence to do whatever it was. I remember one time I wanted to meet with her, and I think it was our first meeting. She said, well, you know what? I can meet at 7 a.m. And I said, okay. I lived in New Jersey. I was working in Lower Manhattan. So I was like, let me get up. And you best believe I was there ready to go, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed at 7 a.m. to meet with her. Anytime she needed me, I generally was meeting very, very early or very late. Most of the time for her, it was really early. But I knew that relationship and her ability to move the needle was something that I needed. So I made sure that I augmented how I did things to make sure I could fit into her world. So you probably may already have a few people or maybe a person in your mind as you're listening or watching this. And if you're unsure of which relationship type to place them in, I want you to take a moment to really ask yourself, how does this person make me feel, or what do they make me think? Do you feel really good when you're around them? Are you challenged? Are you nervous? Are you intimidated? Like, what is the feeling you have? What do you think about when you think about this individual? If you were to think about a person you admire, you could be feeling a sense of motivation or aspiration. You could be thinking to yourself, wow, like that's really where I want to be. If it's someone you respect, someone who I look for, frankly speaking, they kind of scare me. I'm like, I may not even want to be in a room with them because I'm intimidated and I hold them in such high regard. And when it comes to people who can move the needle, think about your big, major goals. Who is that person who makes you feel like that goal is the most achievable with their help? Identifying these kinds of relationships is so crucial before you go ahead and start to cultivate them, because you want to make sure that you're balanced and you have the right people in the right areas to support whatever your goals are. So make sure that you're placing people in the right areas with the right goals. And I really hope that this episode helped give you a little bit more clarity on how to do this. If you have any more questions about relationships, please let me know. And may your next move be your very best move in the workplace.